Ladies and gents, my name's Specimen and welcome to a meta report recap. We're going to look at the best performing decks of the week. We're going to talk about Cull Obsidian as well. Should you buy this card if you haven't done so already? No, in my opinion, you should not. Now, most content creators are going to tell you, this card's insane, this card's crazy. This card is fine, it's good. Does it improve Thanos decks? Yes. Is it going to play and fit into any other deck? Probably not, in my opinion. And it improves Thanos decks barely at all. So I would avoid this card personally. I think there's a lot more fun cards to be spending your tokens or spotlight caches on. So I would avoid it personally. Unsurprisingly, 3 of the best 4 performing decks for this card are just Thanos decks. Why does it improve Thanos decks? Well, it gives you a card to play on turn 4, which means you don't have to play Wave or Psylocke on turn 3 or the Time Stone on turn 3. You can play Cull Obsidian on turn 4 proactively. It also means on turn number 5, you can play Cull Obsidian plus a Stone into your Lockjaw lane, which is quite nice. But that's about it. It's not a bad target to find off of your Lockjaw, although it's in Shang-Chi range, which is pretty bad. But being in Shang-Chi range means it also reduces the cost of your Scar. So I'd say it's pretty much only going to be optimal in Thanos decks, and even then, it's so replaceable. It's one of the worst cards in the deck. I would not bother with this card personally, and I haven't bothered with this card personally. If you've already got it, I'm sure you're happy with your purchase. It's going to be good in Thanos, but it's the most replaceable card in the Thanos deck, in my opinion. So I would avoid this card unless you're Mr. Moneybags and have loads of resources to be spending. We're now going to take a look at the best performing decks in terms of meta lists, and then we're going to be like honing in on the specific lists. So untapped here, we're looking at the latest patch, player collection level of 6,000 plus, and players at infinite rank. So only 80,000 games, so a pretty small sample size, but we're looking at the most try-hard players here. Hela is performing incredibly well. Now, bear in mind, this Hela list is not necessarily the best list, just the most popular list, but Hela in general with a very, very high cube rate. There's not many Cosmos at the moment, so Hela's pretty difficult to predict, and they've moved away from these Invisible Woman builds and instead going for Lockjaw builds. So often what happens is if you're up against Hela, you don't really have a chance of beating them unless they've discarded Hela or your own deck puts up a ton of points. So it's got a very high win rate and a very high average cube rate. Hela has never been stronger, really. Destroy also looking pretty good. Of course, this Hulkbuster nerf hasn't impacted the deck whatsoever. There's a few different ways of playing this deck. Either Hulkbuster or Arnim Zola is the most popular. And it's very, very difficult to deal with. Of course, with armor and things like that, you can put up a good fight. Silver Surfer into the A tier. I posted a video the other day saying this is the best deck in the game right now. And a lot of people said I'm clickbaiting and talking nonsense, but look at this. Silver Surfer in the mixer. This is very close to the list I posted, except this one also has Agent 13 and Captain America, which doesn't really make any sense to be playing these cards when you're playing Killmonger. But apart from that, the list looks pretty good. I would say that this is off because I would want an extra 2-drop in here, and in fact, I just wouldn't play the 1-drop at all. So it's very, very similar to my list. I'm not playing the Captain America and the Agent 13. I'm also not playing Juggernaut, but very, very close to the list that I posted, and I'm not surprised to see Silver Surfer doing very, very well. I think it's a very underrated archetype. Lots of people have been kind of honing in on the Sebastian Shaw version of Surfer, which I don't even think is the way to go. Silver Surfer is all about that control, and even when this deck loses the Valentine buffs to Rogue, Gambit, Mr. Fantastic, and Invisible Woman, I still think Silver Surfer is a top meta contender. Shenaut looking pretty good as well. Of course, Leech on turn 5 can be pretty devastating. Yeah, not really much to say. We know what high Evo can do. It just puts up big points, and this version with Magic, Leech, skipping turn 6 and then slamming Infinite Double or Infinite She-Hulk, or sometimes Infinite Double She-Hulk, it is pretty devastating. This one doesn't play Moon Girl though, so only one She-Hulk. Thanos Lockjaw right up there, of course. Cull Obsidian is the most popular version this week. You can play with it, but you can definitely do without. Lockdown looking very, very strong indeed. Miss Marvel is a gross card who I think needs a nerf pretty desperately. And I can't believe that this card was already nerfed. In my opinion, she needs to have the text that says you need 3 different cards into the lanes you're buffing her up. Because at the moment, she's just a very much plug and play card. Like the fact that Miss Marvel is included in Loki decks kind of says all you need to know for me of how easy she is to include, and she just plays for so many points. As someone that skipped that season pass, I feel like she's so pay to win, it's gross, and I hate it. I also think that Supergiant is a great addition into these lockdown decks as well. High Evo without the magic and stuff is also performing pretty well. Loki decks doing very well, of course, with Miss Marvel in the mixer. There is also the option of playing Heli Carrier, which I think is probably not as optimal, but definitely a fun way of doing things. Bounce is looking quite good, although this most popular version of Bounce doesn't play the new Season Pass card Black Swan, but I think that would be the best way to go. Mr. Negative looking quite okay as well, of course, a good way of farming 8 cube victories, and then Jane Foster just gives you that consistency that's sometimes lacking. Thanos, this is just Thanos in general looking quite good, and then Black Swan also looking decent. There's a few different Black Swan decks. This is a Dracula hand dump. I would say the best Black Swan deck is the movement video. I posted it a few days ago if you want to go check that out. And then down in the C tier, we've got quite a few different builds which aren't performing too well. But in terms of decks which have got more of a low game percentage, low game volume, Lockjaw looking great. I am not surprised. I kind of regret not opening Beta Ray Bill, because I would have also got Galactus, but I was actually on holiday the week it came out, which is why I decided not to. As soon as I saw Beta Ray Bill, I thought standard Lockjaw with Jane Foster is going to pop off. Don't play High Evolutionary, don't play Spider-Ham. Replace those cards, and therefore the Hulk, with just some good value stuff like Jubilee, Leech perhaps. Deck's going to pop off in a big way. Black Knight also looking pretty good. Quite a few different ways you can go about playing Black Knight. Patriot and junk decks, as well as Cerebro 5 looking pretty solid. Now, let's look at the actual best performing decks. So these are decks, again, only with 200 games over or more, and this is an infinite rank with players with collection level 4,000 or above. So there's a whole bunch of decks to look through with more refined lists. So, Bounce, looking quite good. This one with Werewolf and Cull Obsidian. I can kind of see it. I'm not really convinced by the Cull Obsidian personally, but there we go. Destroy, this one with a Shang-Chi, looking pretty good. We've got Junk, which this deck looks pretty damn good. The Eliath being perhaps the unorthodox card to include in this one. We see some players go with Galactus as well. This is a very nice looking Thanos list with Cull Obsidian and Jeff, as well as Kiera. Of course, Kiera isn't going to protect your Cull Obsidian, but most of your other cards. We've got another Thanos Lockjaw deck. We've got a Cull Obsidian deck with Omega Red, Zabu, and Annihilus, as well as Sentry. This one looks pretty good, right? Like, you're getting quite a lot of value from your Scar in this deck, and I think that's a big benefit of playing Cull Obsidian. We've got Hela up next. Hela looking very good. This one with a Black Cat, a Black Knight version, another Thanos deck as well. We're seeing Silver Smurfer. What a deck Silver Surfer is, in my opinion. This one with the Agent 13 and the Captain America. Again, I wouldn't personally play these cards. I think playing Agent 13 and Killmonger makes no sense whatsoever, but there we are. But very, very similar to the list that I shared on my YouTube channel. I would definitely recommend playing that version of Surfer over this one. We've got Hela with Black Cat again with a Lockjaw Blade Black Knight. We've got a Lockdown deck, this one with Miss Marvel. No sign of Supergiant in this one, which I do feel like Supergiant has to be the way to go with Lockdown decks, but looking like a very well-performing deck. Another Destroy deck, this one with the Zola instead of the Hulkbuster, which is probably the way to go. I think Zola just wins you so many 8-cube victories of people that aren't expecting it, that it probably just has to be worth it. And as we continue to look at the decks performing well, we've got more Cull Obsidian, so perhaps I'm underestimating this card. Again, with the Scar, this one with a Professor X, which is quite interesting. Of course, a Tuma with 0 synergy. We've got a Black Swan Cull Obsidian deck with a very high win rate, with Supergiant also in the mixer there. Lots of new cards here performing well in Thanos. I think any Thanos deck is going to be looking pretty good. We've got Destroy, this one with the Hulkbuster and with the Zola, which is pretty interesting to see. So this one has cut Deathlock, and I can definitely see why this is performing so well. Hulkbuster just supercharges your Null. Of course, you can get a huge Deadpool, or you can Hulkbuster the X-23 or the Wolverine. And then you've got the Venom, the Venom Zola option. You've got also the Null Zola option. So I can see why this is the best performing Destroy deck. Another Thanos Lockjaw deck. This one also with Cull Obsidian, but with a Psylocke. And then I think we're getting pretty close to the top. We have a pretty interesting Zabu deck with Supergiant, with Blob, with no Ghost Rider, but it's kind of like a Dracula hand dump with lots of high cost cards. But the Dracula looks pretty spooky with the Taskmaster and things things like that. So an interesting build. We've got another lockdown deck. This one does have the Supergiant. It does have Miss Marvel. It does have Eliath. I'm a little bit surprised to see no Absorbing Man, though, with the Supergiant combo. I think that would be pretty devastating. But yeah, no surprises to see that Miss Marvel, Supergiant, Eliath is performing really, really well. I think it should be one of the best decks in the game, if not the best deck. This one is a Agatha deck, which is something you can disregard. This is just a deck which is farming boosters and is going to be at a very, very low hidden MMR, and that's why its win rate is so high. Disregard this entirely. This is evidence that this data is worth looking at with a pinch of salt and can't be trusted entirely. And then up at the top, a lockdown deck. This one has Vision Scarlet Witch for the Romance week. Just getting your Vision a few extra points, and Scarlet Witch as a 4/2 is very reasonable indeed. Very, very similar deck, although this one's still not playing that Absorbing Man, which I'm a little bit surprised by, but this one doesn't have Supergiant either. So Supergiant Absorbing Man, I think, could be a great way to go with these decks. And that is the final review of the meta report. So Cull Obsidian clearly is performing pretty well. I would just personally say that it's not that good and it's a bit boring. But if you're someone that owns Scar, maybe I've underestimated how good this card is because of the Scar synergy, and you could go ahead and get it if you're just looking to win. If you're looking to have a bit of fun, though, I think there's better options to be spending your resources on. In terms of the meta report, Hela, Destroy Surfer, Shenaut, Thanos Lockjaw, Lockdown, Loki, and High Evo, probably the top contenders. So a very open meta, and yeah, just some ideas for decks that you might want to play there. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick meta report review looking at the data. Excited to talk about the decks performing best next week. Thanks so much for watching. See you very soon. Bye now.